How's everyone doing today? Coach Wilson is in the building. And with the rise of data and technology, everywhere you go, you hear about this boom in artificial intelligence and the potential harm or the problems that it may solve. Well, today I'm going to talk a little bit about metrics that matter in the health and fitness world and how you can use this data and technology to your advantage to improve your health and well-being. So diving into health metrics that are generally extracted from wearable devices or Bluetooth scales. I want to talk about some metrics that matter, some key things that you should be looking out for. What exactly do they mean? What are good scores? And what you should be watching as you incorporate tracking these metrics in your everyday life. Here at HyperSpeed, the foundation of how we quantify health and performance will always begin with the age and biological gender of the user. Not trying to raise any controversy, but that will play a critical role in how we analyze the body's chemistry, how they are going to adapt to exercise, and the amount of muscle mass they have the capacity to possess. So, going into weight. We look at weight from the muscle mass to body fat ratio. And that body fat percentage is going to give us a good indicator of that person's overall body composition. Their muscle mass is generally going to play a key role in their ability to recover, their metabolic rate, as well as their potential for strength gains and power output. But that body fat percentage, on the other hand, the higher that number is, the greater they are at risk of suffering from things like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, etc., etc. And when we look at the body's composition and we go a little deeper, visceral fat, that is a metric or a term that we look at very intently. And that is because that is an even greater indicator of disease or illness. And that is the fat that is found around your organs. It's the subcutaneous layer. And if there is a lot of fat in that area, that can have a major impact on your blood circulation, which is going to strain your heart, which again leads to heart disease, which can lead to various other complications as blood and oxygen are flowing in and out of your body. Now, when we talked about that basal metabolic rate, which the more muscle mass you have, the more calories you're actually going to burn when you are sedentary, which is a good problem to have. Anyhow, with a lack of muscle mass, your body is not going to be burning as calories at that same rate. And so that will actually have a great impact on you, especially as you age and it gets more difficult to build muscle mass, because for men, your body's going to start slowing down around 30, and for women around 25, 26. So our goal is to pack on as much muscle mass as we can in our earlier years, so we will have that foundation as we age, so that'll be easier to build and pack on more, and will allow us to eat more to replenish our body. Also, whatever our metabolic rate is going to dictate the amount of calories we have to consume on a day-to-day basis. It will give us a barometer for if we're trying to gain weight, we have to be in a surplus, and if we're trying to lose weight, we are going to be in a deficit. So if I can extract that number and get an accurate reading of it, that's going to allow me to understand the foundation of my program design in regards to how many calories I should be burning and what I should be consuming. Now, we always hear people say sleep is incredibly important. And why? Because that is your body's regenerative process. It's like your body's a computer, and you gotta let that software take a rest, which is very similar to your brain, so it'll allow you to perform at the best of your abilities. So when we talk about sleep, obviously we want to focus on the hours that we sleep on a day-to-day basis, and we'd like for the time we go to bed and the time we wake up to be very consistent. But when we look at sleep time, we obviously would like to all be at that 8-hour range. Now that may not be a realistic goal for some people based on work, family, and various other priorities in their life. However, getting at a minimum of 6 hours a week is of the 6 hours a day is of the utmost importance, Because if you are sleep deprived, that is going to impact your brain function, your ability to process information, and will directly have an impact on your nervous system and your body's ability to trigger your mind's ability to trigger a response into your body to do the things that you want to do at the speed you want to do them. Incredibly important in the realm of sport because everything is reactive. Really summing up sleep is you want to develop a pattern and you want to have a sweet spot for knowing, okay, when I get this amount of sleep and I go to bed at this time, this is generally what prepares me to be at my best. Also, with sleep, it is important for you to really begin winding down an hour or two before you sleep. And so that is reducing the amount of light you're around, making sure that you eat 2 to 3 hours before you go to sleep. And why that's important is because that is going to impact your body's digestive process. When you are digesting food, when you are asleep, your body is working really hard and it's actually straining you. And so sometimes if you have a large meal before you go to bed, you're actually going to wake up tired and lethargic because your body had to do all that work and it was very limited in its movement because you were asleep laying down for 6 to 8 hours. And so you weren't able to burn those calories off. Now, when we talk about sleep and quality of recovery, that really boils down to HRV. And what HRV stands for is heart rate variability. And that is the interval between beats of your heart as it is pulsating every second you are alive. That HRV number is a primary indicator of the stress that your body is under. And as you are sleep deprived or overtraining, you're going to see a major fluctuation within that number. Now, that number can be hard to read at times, especially based on the device that you have. So it is really important to make sure that that metric with whatever device you are tracking it with is staying consistent. And there will generally be indicators such as your recovery score or even your device in the user interface giving you a response saying, hey, try to go to bed a little earlier, which is great. And some wearables have the ability to give recommendations based on the frequency in which you are hitting the same numbers consistently. Heart rate variability is a very, very complex metric. So I'm not going to dive into that because that could be outside of my scope of practice. And I'm just being totally honest, but I will say that that is a vital component to how your body's sleeping and how you are responding throughout the day. So that is something that we should all be looking for as we're trying to track how you are responding to the various stressors and the activities in your life. Now, resting heart rate. Now, this is one that varies with age specifically because a young, healthier person is going to have a lower resting heart rate. And you want that number to ideally be in the 60s. Once you start dropping below 60, that's even better. And if you are in elite shape, it's going to be in the mid 40s. I remember reading there are Navy SEALs that have resting heart rates in the upper 30s. And that's when I started getting obsessed with that metric, saying how low can I bring it down? But that is generally going to be an indicator of an individual's cardiovascular fitness levels. And you want to make sure that that resting heart rate is nice and low and you're calm. It's an indicator of your mental, emotional state as well. When we think about anxiety, your heart starts beating fast. We drink a lot of caffeine, our heart starts beating fast. And so if someone suffers from anxiety and then looking at that resting heart rate, that's going to be a good indicator of why that's happening, what that looks like, and also seeing the time of the day in which that heart rate is fluctuating. Another advanced metric could be heart rate zones. So when you're running long distance, for instance, how long are you getting in the upper 150s, 160s? Or how high can you even get your max heart rate? Some people have the ability to get their heart rate in the 200s, which makes you believe, wow, my heart's beating out of my chest. But that's a very, very advanced athlete that can even handle that capacity and then come back down. So understand that there's about 5 or 6 heart rate zones, and understanding when you're in a zone and what the intensity level is that you're working at. And then the more conditioned you become throughout a period of time, you are actually not working as hard. And so that heart rate zones, they actually start getting lower and lower. And so for someone doing 10 burpees, that may get an unconditioned person up in the 150s, 160s. And for a very healthy, fit person, that may get them in the 100s. So understanding where your baseline is at and understanding those zones, especially while you're training, can be pivotal in understanding how hard you're working and when you are at a calm, resting state. So that is the beats in your heart, and that is generally judged by the number of beats per minute. Going from the heartbeat, another key metric is respiratory rate. Now this will generally be around 13 to 15 breaths per minute. However, that doesn't vary much with most people, but when you see it below 12 and down to that 9 or 8, that could mean that someone's showing minimal signs of life and their breathing could be compromised. Or if someone's is at 22, 23, that could be an indicator of heart disease or some sort of lung issue. So that is a pivotal number, but more so as a health indicator. It's almost like a vital sign in understanding really how much life someone has. We want to see that number generally between the 13 to 15 range. Now, I want to transition into more about activity. Now, when I think about wearable devices and when they initially came to the market, the primary reason for them were to track activity. Beyond just heart rate zones, it was calories burned, and that is generally measured by the intensity of the workout. The harder you're working, the more calories you're going to burn. Now, not every device is going to be accurate, but what they do is that they give you a framework to build off of. Okay, when I am doing 3 workouts in a day, I burn close to 1,000. When I go on a 2-mile run, I burn 500. I know that I'm trying to lose 5 pounds over the course of the next 3 weeks. So I have to be in a deficit. So if I consumed 1,500 calories and I know where my basal metabolic rate is, I know that if I run 2 miles, that's going to get me to that deficit goal that I have. Knowing how many calories you're burning per day is a great indicator to measure your activity levels. Regardless of the accuracy, it is all relative. And so less activity, you're going to burn less calories, and more activity, you're obviously going to burn more calories. Some devices will actually take your basal metabolic rate into account, and so it's important to measure calories burned through activity as opposed to just calories burned, and different devices will actually quantify them or label them differently. So it's a key thing to watch. However, sometimes you will actually know where your basal metabolic rate is, or a ballpark idea through the device. So calories burned is a vital way to understand how hard you're working. It can be a key component of judging the intensity of your workouts, especially if you're following a very strict workout plan. Now, beyond calories burned, the next key activity metric, and really the only other one that devices have the ability to track, is the number of steps you are taking per day. Now, that has created a lot of controversy because when wearables first came to the market, it was always all about steps. How active are you? Did you hit your 15,000 steps, your 20,000 steps? Well, not all steps are created equally, and that's just the nature of it. Some people have longer limbs and they take less steps. Some people carry more weight, so they have to work harder taking less steps. Now, you also have some people that are just a little older, they have joint pain and they're not very active. So getting a non-active person to begin going from 1,000 steps to 5,000 steps, well, that's a major jump, and that is what I would call progress. And so that is all relative as well. I personally love the step indicator because if I'm working with a person that's not very active, it's just allowing me to understand how frequently they're moving. And at HyperSpeed, we actually created a metric called Move Score, where we took the average amount of steps per day with the average amount of calories per day and smashed those metrics together to give us a better understanding for just how active the individual is as well, and also trying to gamify that because we're saying, okay, we know that it's relative, but how hard were you actually working in conjunction with those steps? I like steps because it allows everyone to participate and it allows you to gamify the experience and just move. The Apple Watch has a cool little tool that allows you to compete with friends and family, seeing who can take the most steps throughout the day. Any sort of incentive to keep people moving, I am an advocate for. So when we sum up some of these core metrics and how we can incorporate them in our lives, I think what we're really trying to establish is how are we recovering? How are we responding to everyday life? How active are we? And how can we mitigate our health risk? With metrics like resting heart rate, HRV, visceral fat, basal metabolic rate, body fat percentage, we're gonna get a good understanding. What we try to do here at HyperSpeed is on a visual dashboard, put all of them on there so that we can see exactly where we're at in a really easy to interpret manner. What these metrics are performance indicators, and how we can have a place for them and understanding the weight and the value that they have relative to one's performance to understand where you're at, what behaviors put you at your best, what does your best look like, and what do you need to do to stay there. So as I've reviewed some of these key metrics, what they mean and how to track them, if you would like to know a little more, we have a blog found on our HyperSpeed website where I discuss the metrics that matter in great depth, and the link is provided below. We have also written an ebook here at HyperSpeed where it really just breaks down a philosophy of how you can incorporate data and technology to really just engineer your entire life, looking at your body as that of a machine and how you can put yourself in position to optimize not only your performance but your overall productivity. And lastly, if you want to get involved and really take it to the next level, if you take our health risk assessment, you can begin playing our game, and that is quantifying your performance on a day-to-day basis.